Siege is very much like that. It's a logical process of steps to an end goal of ultimately winning the round. I wouldn't be the person I am today, or even the coach I am today, without him. I kind of soak up the highs and the lows for them, if that makes sense. Like, because you can single-handedly win a game off your prep. Before you even start the game, you can win the game. I completely flipped the map bans. Hand on heart, like, that was one of the ban phases I just completely lost.
Welcome to an untitled podcast. No clue what we're calling it yet, but today we have a very special guest all the way from the UK. Ryan Morrow joins us. I said Morrow. I said I wasn't going to say it, and I went and said it. It's Morrow, as in tomorrow. Also, you would know him better as KangruKenny, or the man that yells behind DarkZero at the most previous tournaments. Six Invitational was an interesting one. I'm sure we'll get there. Before we do, I want to know a little bit more around your name. It's an interesting one. One a little close to the heart of Australians, KangruKenny. Do you dare explain where this has come from?
So I went traveling in Australia and New Zealand in 2019, and at the time, my favorite artist was Kendrick Lamar. His nickname is KangruKenny. And Australia, known for their kangaroos. I thought KangruKenny, I just kind of like formulated out of nature, and that's the beauty of it.
You know what? I'm not going to lie. That's a phenomenal way to get a nickname. Many people have far greater ways and far fewer stories about their nickname. Kendrick Lamar, though, that feels like a bit of an odd one coming from the UK. Is it just culture?
I just love his music. It's I've kind of like grown up throughout the timeline of his albums. So
okay.
And I feel like music's very nostalgic. Like the people who you listen to throughout your life, they all kind of tie back to who you grew up listening to. And the artists that are releasing their prime music while you're growing up are kind of your favorite ever artists, you know, in a different generation. That would be the Beatles with you know, my parents. It's just like, who's your first album that you bought?
See, mine was Linkin Park, so I can never turn away from that one. Unfortunately, I don't have any cool nickname or story that is tying to that whatsoever. But let's not keep talking about nicknames. Let's talk a little bit about your history, I guess. It's got here that technically you've been playing since 2020 as a semi-pro player, but where does your journey start in Siege?
Watching the pre-alpha gameplay. Back in 2014 was it released, and then the game was released in December 2015. I picked the game up first off with my schoolmates. Loved the look of the game. We started playing it for the first month. They all got bored of it, and then I kept playing it by myself, and I went from there. I started on Xbox. I made the move to PC around 2020. And yeah, here now, which has kind of been a crazy evolution.
So then can you, I guess, lean into the Xbox conversation a little? How far did you end up playing as a player? Was it only casually? Was it professionally?
It was casual for a while because I was playing solo. I was just playing on my own. I was just playing ranked. And then I met some people in ranked. I solo queued. I queued into their 4-stack on their team. I carried the shit out of them. They asked me if I wanted to continue playing, and then those people I just played with on Xbox, I then got to know other people through them, and we started playing the Go4s and like the monthly tournaments, and we were actually doing pretty well then. And I was watching Pro League alongside. I was so fascinated. I fell in love with EG and Troy specifically back then. Even though I was EU, I was an EG fan. I was not on the Penta side. And I went to the Paris Major in 2018, which was my first event. And from then on, I just kind of always knew I looked to these guys and I wanted to do what they were doing. I loved the game so much, and if I could just play the game as a job and as a living, that was my aspiration. So that's why I made the move to PC, as you know, many people have done who are now in Pro League, made the switch over from Xbox, and aspire to make Pro League.
Many people did indeed start on Xbox. I feel like a lot of people I spoke to back in the day, especially from ANZ, a lot of players came from Xbox. So that's not a story I think that most people are unfamiliar with by any means. One thing that I'm always curious about is why Siege for a lot of players. Why was it that Siege dragged you in? Is it the strategic nature of it? Is it the complexity of it?
It's weird because a lot of people came to Siege through other shooters, like either COD or CS mainly. My background, this was my first FPS.
Wow!
On Xbox. On Xbox, I just played not party games, but I played like FIFA with my mates, GTA with my mates. It was a lot of just multiplayer games that we decided to play together. Plants vs Zombies: Garden Warfare was an absolute classic. To be fair, I did play Titanfall. Titanfall was a shooter, so technically that was an FPS beforehand. But it was just Siege drew me in with the ruggedness, the real dark aesthetic of the game, how tactical it looked. I'm a very logical person, so throughout school, like maths was my good subject, just because I was so logical. I loved problem solving with something that was very black and white. This is the right answer. I didn't like English. I didn't like when I had to interpret things. I just liked a solid. If you do the right work, you'll get, or the right steps, you'll get the end result. And Siege is very much like that. It's a logical process of steps to an end goal of ultimately winning the round. And that's what drew me in. I just loved the aesthetics of the game when it first released were a big selling point. It was just like that. A game that made you feel something. It made you feel immersed. It made you feel you were actually in that building infiltrating the terrorists. And because back then no one knew how to play, so everyone was like playing slow. And it actually felt like really scary to go around a corner. You're not expecting someone to be there. And game was fantastic.
Yeah, I think my first kind of iteration into Siege was like 2018. That was the very first time I played the game. So well after it had already been released, and it had kind of moved away from that darkness that you're talking about when it first came out. Obviously, a lot of the maps, visibility was actually a bit of an issue. It feels as though, I don't know if you've seen much of the pre-alpha of Siege X, but it feels like they're going back a little more to their roots in some of the maps. We're getting a little bit more darkness in it. Are you excited for that?
Yeah, I like the look of Siege X. The 6v6 map, it's kind of got that same sort of feel, going back to less bright colors, which isn't maybe to the masses isn't the best thing, but I kind of like that feeling of the game. So it definitely looks good. Siege X is very promising, and I can't wait mainly for the sound.
Oh yeah,
for the sound overhaul. Long time coming.
Yeah, there's a lot, like for Siege X, there's a lot that could just completely shift, I guess, like the future that we've got in esports with it, because it opens up so many capabilities that just, I guess, realistically have been questionable in some points throughout the last 10 years, but mainly in the last 6 years of the esports, where it's really started to flourish and everything's gotten a little deeper. To have this kind of update, I'm really curious to see how things start to shift from here. Speaking of, I guess, playing the game, you were, or at least my short amount of research that I found, you started playing before you got involved in talent work, before you got involved in coaching. Can you talk about your playing career? How'd you feel that went?
Well, career is a bit of an overestimation of it. I originally I wanted to play, and I loved playing the game. How I am behind the players is how I am in game. I can play the game, and I play to an all right standard, but to a pro level, like my mechanics just aren't on par. It was short-lived. It was just playing T4 tournaments in EU. Loving that. I had to... So the initial team that we built with me, Leader, and Azza, they asked me to be the coach for their team. Like, I just played ranked with them, knew them from Xbox. I knew Leader from Xbox. Azza moved well before I moved. Didn't really play with them. But Leader knew Azza, I knew Leader. we created a team going into back then when we still had the Nats leagues, the UK and Ireland Nationals. We made a team to qualify for the second division for that. I had to play the qualifiers because one of our players wasn't 18 at the time of the qualifiers. So I had to play the qualifiers.
That's tough.
And then I had to play the first game of the league. And that was the end of my playing career. My first ever, fun fact, my first ever official game in UK Division 2 was Fresh's first ever cast.
Oh wow, look at that. That's why he's got a soft place in his heart for you.
Yeah.
Honestly, at SI, we were talking so much about you. Maybe not on the desk necessarily, off the desk, but when it came to the desk, there was a lot of love thrown your way, particularly for the way that you dealt with players. You said that you play the same way that you coach behind the team. For those of you that did not get to witness greatness or whatever is closest to it, Kenny, you have can I call you Kenny? Can I shorten it?
Yeah.
Kenny, I've got to ask you, where does that come from? Is it pure passion? Do you feel that that is the greatest point of your direction? And for those, I'll show a clip on screen just to give some context here. But for those that don't know, probably one of the most vocal people that we've got in the Siege community, especially behind the seats. There's a couple of them. There's a couple of coaches that come to mind, but particularly in Boston, we saw some interesting scenes. Where does it come from? Where does this passion arise?
I'd say there are two factors to it. The first one is my genuine competitive nature. I grew up with sports and competitive sports. I started martial arts, taekwondo, when I was 5 years old. And I continued that until I was about 16. I competed internationally representing England. Got my black belt when I was 11. I was then, when I was 11 or 12, I joined a rugby team. I really liked rugby. My dad's a massive rugby fan, so I kind of got into that and had some amazing highs with the rugby team. We won the league division for the first time in the club's 52-year history, which is a massive achievement for the club. So I just grown up my whole childhood with sports and competition and wanting to win, and I had the luxury of one of the best taekwondo instructors in all of England that was local to me, and I wouldn't be the person I am today or even the coach I am today without him. Just everything that he stood for, I can actually, when I think about it now, I mirror a lot of the way he taught me in taekwondo with how I coach now, and it was a real eye-opener that like all my confidence and everything just kind of came from him, and that's mirrored in my coaching, that I want to do the same with my players. Like I want to elevate them not only in game but out of game as well, like as better people, up their confidence, and know that if you put your mind to it, you can achieve it. And the second thing, like obviously that tailed off a bit, but I love competition and I love winning, basically. And the second thing is it's probably because I'm just a fan of the game. I love Siege, and the way that I am behind the players for when we're playing is the same reactions that I have when I'm sat at home watching games. When I'm watching an SI final, like I'm jumping out my chair when a crazy play happens. I'm screaming. Like it's, my mum must hate it, but I just can't control it. I just have a love for competition and I have a love for the game. And those two just marry together to something that's kind of uncontrollable.
It's like petrol and fire, if I'm being completely honest. Once that gets lit, it is a sight to witness. And I think that realistically, like there's a lot of characters that we have in Siege. There's a lot of really interesting players and coaches that we've seen. I think that you've got this really unique approach when you're coaching, because whatever you're doing, it seems to work. At the most recent SI, we saw a lot of, I guess, The best way that I would have described looking at DarkZero's performance is there was a lot of highs and a lot of lows, and the highs were really high and the lows were really lows. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with the up and downs as a coach? Because that is something that, yes, it can come innately, but you also have to be able to build to it.
Yeah, I think the benefit that I see from how I am behind the players is that I kind of I kind of soak up the highs and the lows for them, if that makes sense. Like,
Sure.
in a way, it's like the antithesis of each other. Like, if I am the one getting hyped, then the players don't feel the need to. So then they stay at that level playing field that you want from the team. Obviously, everyone's different, and everyone can react to those different styles, and people can get hyped off me. And if that then benefits them, I obviously see that as a positive. So moving to DZ, different people. It works really well with ITB because everyone was very nonchalant in ITB. We didn't really have anyone who was gonna scream or gonna get super hyped, and so I felt like I needed to be that guy so that we could have the highs and the players could feel the highs, but not overreact to the highs. So I think that's why it works. Obviously, I can't really soak up the lows. One thing that I've learnt to do to not make the lows as low is I did this a lot at Manchester. A lot of Manchester is congratulate the other team and celebrate the other team winning a round because then it's kind of an irony for me behind the play or the players when I'm behind them and they win a round and I go really good take, great attack. We're taking that one for next time. Just like being silly, and so those lows are kind of bumped up and the highs are bumped up as well.
It's definitely something that you see. Some people struggle with it. Some people struggle with the lows of Siege because, and I'm not just talking Siege, I'm talking wider esports. When things get rough, when they take a dark turn, you really see it on the players' faces, right? And I think that you behind them, you've got that that aura that kind of allows it to be okay. Mistakes can happen. You're not going to absolutely rifle them, as we have seen some people do in the past, and it works for some people. Others, it doesn't. It's a very interesting. I guess there's two sides of the same coin, two very different approaches. They both work equally. It just depends on what the team looks like. You mentioned Into the Breach there. I guess perfect time to kind of jump back in time. I know we're doing a little bit of, like, chronologically speaking, this podcast is absolutely awful outside of the playing career because now we're just going to and fro from SI Boston all the way back to Manchester, even further back to 2022. I actually want to kickstart the conversation realistically around your coaching career in 2022 because that's where you seem to make the biggest mark. That's where you kind of had the first big step forward, which is things as you were talking about, like the Nat League, then of course, European Challenger League. Can you give me a bit of insight? In the early days of coaching, obviously you've been doing it for 3-4 years now. Where did you find your inspiration from?
I suppose a majority, I don't want to say self-taught, but there's not a lot of coaching resources out there in terms of up-and-coming coaches, like knowing how to coach in Siege specifically, or what it means to be a coach. Players, you can go on YouTube and have a look at aim tutorials and watch, other pro players play and mirror their movement, copy their settings. You don't really have any of that as a coach. I would say that I'm just naturally a person who likes to be in control. So I naturally gravitated towards a coaching aspect. I'm a big thinker, as I've spoken about. Like, I like the logic of things, and that just those qualities. And I think one of my biggest qualities is that I understand people. Like, I studied psychology a bit at school, so I understand like emotional intelligence and empathy and what kind of makes people tick, and understand what everyone's different and everyone has different triggers or reactions to certain things, what different personalities mean. And I'm very interested in how the brain works and how, like, just how people tick. And I suppose that also plays into my interest and why I find it. I love what I do because I get little. I don't know what the word is, but I get enjoyment out of all those different aspects. I tap into my joy for logically problem solving. I tap into my joy for psychology and understanding and reading people, and ultimately getting the best from them performance wise, the social aspect, and then the strategic aspect of actually Siege itself. So there's many different reasons, but I've just very much gravitated towards it and kind of found my calling. It's a very cliche term, and a lot of people say when they get to like their 30s, 40s, 50s, a lot of people, the line of work they're in, they never really aspired to do that in school. And I didn't even know what I wanted to be when I was in school. I didn't have a clue. So I don't really fall into that. But say like actors, like they didn't aspire to always be an actor. They just kind of like certain circumstances or scenarios occurred, and then they found themselves in that. And I was kind of the same with coaching and Siege. Like I wanted to go pro at a point, and one day I got asked to be a coach. So I was kind of funneled into that. It wasn't like I was actively pursuing it, but that's what I mean. Like I kind of like stumbled upon it and then found that really suited me, and I've just run with it ever since.
Well, isn't it interesting? Like we all end up where we should be. At least that's truly what I believe. We all end up in places that we find strengths from. So, look, some people unfortunately don't get that opportunity. Others are lucky, and I feel as though in your position, if you look at everything that we've talked about up until this point, you had a great coach back in rugby that kind of led you to, I guess, understanding what it's like to have to lead a team from a certain perspective. You have the competitive side of your taekwondo from way back when that you were extremely competitive and good at the same time. You enjoy psychology and what makes people tick. Perfect for players. You enjoy 1 + 2 = 3. It all adds up to something that I guess kind of hallmarks what will be, if you continue down the track that you're going, a phenomenal career. Where was that breaking point for you at the very start as a coach? Was it breaking into the European Challenger League? Was it just the Nat Premier finishing first? Like where was that aha moment? Like this is something that is actually going to be viable and will work.
Ooh, I think our first win as 10-star at the start of 2022, when we won the Rainbow Rumble, which people nowadays, the Rainbow Rumble is like one of the 3 EU Tier 2 tournaments. Back then it was just a complete standalone tournament where Tier 1 teams and UK Tier 2 teams and a few European teams that qualified played together. And we won that, and we won the final decisively. I think we won the final like 6-2, 6-2, with a map advantage because we came from the upper bracket as well. So back when you got map advantage in best of 5. But we won that pretty decisively. We were at boot camp for that as well. And then the next day, after that, winning that final, we then had our playoff game to qualify for UK Division 1 from Division 2, and then we qualified for that as well handedly. So back into Tier 3 into the Nats League, and just the first like scratch of proper success. Well, obviously in the grand scheme of things, winning a Tier 3 standalone league and qualifying to a Tier 3 league isn't big, but back then, when you're starting out, you get that first itch of achievement and winning. And whenever you win like that first or second, like it just builds that hunger to want to do it again, because the feeling and reward of your work is so prevalent. And that was when I was like, yeah, okay, this is like we have the team to be able to take it further. I believe I have the skills to take it further, and that was the point.
I feel like, everyone's breaking point is different, right? But there is always that moment. There's that moment where you go, hang on a second, we have something here, whether it's as a team, whether it's individually. I don't think it matters whether it comes in tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Everyone has a different point. I remember my very first time ever doing like a studio cast, and I was like, holy shit, I've made it. I am the greatest thing to grace this screen. Very quickly you get humbled, but it's all about like those stepping stones. It's the blocks that you build upon, and slowly and surely you become a lot more comfortable. Comfortability is something that I think we all strive for, but you reached it last year. You made it into the tier 1 circuit. You were on the European League in both stage 1, stage 2. You were looking, I would say, you were looking dangerous, if I can be perfectly honest with you. How do you find, I guess, that transition from tier 3 into tier 1?
It was big. And I think you realize that out of the tier 1 circuit, tier 3 teams, tier 2 teams could beat tier 1 teams. That is without the question. There isn't a massive skill gap, realistically, back then. Nowadays, I think there's a big gap. But tier 3 teams, tier 2 teams could beat tier 1 teams in the standalone leagues, in qualifiers for Gamers 8 back when they occurred, and SI qualifiers. Like, there are upsets all the time. Obviously, BO1s aren't great for that, but upsets still happen in BO3s. We as 10-star even beat Heroic in a best of 5 where they had map advantage and map ban advantage, which was crazy.
Still diff.
But you realize when you get to tier 1 what makes the tier 1 teams different, and when you take that step up into tier 1 as a tier 2 team or tier 1 player or whatever, the preparation, and when tier 1 teams actually prepare for you in a game scenario, in the league, in a major, whatever, that is what sets them apart. Like, you will single-handedly lose every game as if you come into tier 1 just based on the tier 1 teams preparing for you and playing to a style, or playing strats, or counter-stratting, or counter-play styling, what suits you. But they don't do that in, say, qualifiers, because they don't know who they're facing until it comes, and they don't have the time to prepare, and it's just 2 teams on raw skill. When the raw skill isn't that big difference. And that's what, when I came to tier 1, I realized that, holy shit, these teams are literally just beating us on pure counter prep.
That's terrifying to know that is how quickly it shifts. Is that like the biggest takeaway of it?
Yeah, I think like the tier 1 team, say even in scrims, like you will get battered in like a BDS scrim or a G2 scrim, VP scrim back then. Like they'll tend to you, they'll 9-3 you on certain maps. But for the most part, like there wasn't a big disparity when we were a tier 2 team into our tier 1 scores in scrims. But and then in qualifiers you'll be competitive with them. I remember like in Gamers 8 quals, I think it was, like we were going 5-7 on maps of BDS, that sort of thing. And like as a tier 2 team, that feels really rewarding. But as soon as you're in tier 1, you realize the gulf of difference that preparation for these tier 1 teams makes, and the difference that the staff make, because obviously the staff are the ones that are doing that preparation game. And that's why I quickly realized, and I bought into that, counter-stratting was one of my main focuses in tier 1, because you can single-handedly win a game off your prep. Before you even start the game, you can win the game. And I had games like that in tier 1. I knew as soon as the map came, I knew we had won the game before it even happened, because our prep was just that good and that well thought out. And I know that the players were the ones who could execute that plan. And I saw that even worse at EWC. FaZe and Furia. This was the first time we played Brazilian teams. At Manchester, we played 3 NA teams and Bleed.
Bleed.
And then
shout out the APAC team, baby.
Yeah. And then that wasn't that bad. Like, I don't really think anyone counted us heavily. But that we got to EWC. First game was against Furia. Like, we had known that we were playing Furia for 3 weeks beforehand. We knew they were going to counter prep us because everyone knows a heavy counter prep team. Oh my god, they had specific counter strats for every single attack we had done ever on border. They countered our first push, and then it was like they were so genius that they also countered. Like, they predicted how we would avoid them countering us and what we would adapt to how they were denying us into the building. And then they had a second counter waiting there at that point. It was just like, that was an eye-opener. FaZe did the same in a BO3. We 7-1 them on Chalet. They're not very good at Chalet. But then the Skyscraper and the Bank, oh my lord. They exploited everything from us in their counter game as well. And that was just a big opener. If you want to perform at international events, you have to be able to adapt to people countering you, and you have to be able to counter the others as well.
So obviously you've recently joined DarkZero, right? We saw you with Into the Breach up until the end of 2024. Realistically, what was like what was the key takeaway from working with Into the Breach? Like, aside from obviously, you know, the palm to the head that is Tier 1 Siege, what was the takeaway that you took from working with that roster, from working with that team, and everything that you achieved throughout your European stage?
It was that we could compete with the best teams in the world without the best players. And it doesn't matter who you have on a team, as long as you play under one identity, everyone buys into the philosophy, you have a good team culture, a good environment, you can compete at the highest level. And you don't need star players to do that. Like, no one looked at Into the Breach and thought, wow, team of gunners. These guys can just can just win a game based off their gun skill. I remember watching the pre matches for Stage 1 of Europe for Manchester. Everyone was just like not talking down, that's the wrong term, but discrediting us as a team, or the strength of this team, or the ceiling of the team, because we don't have any star players. We had 4 rookies and Kendru, and we understood the team that we were, and we understood the team that we weren't. And our first stage, we finished second in Europe. That was an incredible achievement. We qualified to the major. I actually thought we performed well at Manchester. We just ended up running into Beast Coast in our elimination game.
Very unlucky.
And Beast Coast at Manchester, no one could stop them. I genuinely thought if we didn't hit Beast Coast, we could have made the main stage. We would have had to play a good team to have made main stage, but we had already shown really good signs that we had beaten SSG. We had lost to Bleed 7-5, which unfortunately we were the first recipients of the Bleed Nighthaven, which they had not shown yet. And then who was the other game?
M80.
It
was 7-4.
No, it was a 7-0. That game will haunt me. It was in Oregon. It was 7-0, and I remember it because I completely fucked the map bans. Hand on heart, like, that was one of the ban phases I just completely lost in my career.
Yeah.
And then we ran into Beast Coast.
So that might be a perfect quick segue. No, you know what? Finish what you were going to say. Sorry.
And then just following on to EWC, we played FaZe and we played Furia. Both of those teams felt beatable. Both of them, yes, they obliterated us with the counter strats, and like when we attacked them, like we had good defense halves, but we just struggled to be able to attack against them and adapt. And with the lack of international experience, I think that showed through in our stature to be able to pick those teams apart who have really good experience. They just knew how to beat us. We didn't know how to beat them. But the fact that they both felt beatable, and these are two teams who have 4 months ago competed at SI Grand Final, was a really good sign for us, because we weren't a team of superstars, but we knew how to play the game our way, and that was a really good sign that you can build anything in this game.
Since we're on the topic of LANs, didn't mean to cut you off before. I was actually going to ask about map vetoes and how you approach them, but honestly, we might actually hold that one, because I think this kind of line of question, I think a lot of people will find a little more interesting than just the map vetoes, which is, we're talking about LANs here. Let's keep on that topic for right now. Prior to Manchester, had you been to a LAN as a coach or even as a player?
I'd been to MPL LAN, which was the Northern Premier League, so Tier 3 LAN. That's where we beat Heroic in the final. But that was there was no crowd. It was just in a filming studio in I can't remember where it was, but it was somewhere in England.
Yeah. So adapting to LAN doesn't really matter whether you're a player, a coach, someone on the desk. It does take a little bit of adapting. Did you find that it was difficult? Was there ease to it? Was it better because you were all in people? How did you find your first tier 1 LAN? How did you find Manchester?
Manchester was really bad for me. If I'm being brutally honest, excuse me, it was awful. I suffer from chronic fatigue syndrome, which means it's okay. Thank you. I get very, very low energy. I have to sleep a lot. But just generally, I'd never feel bright as daisies. I have to constantly battle with my energy levels, and me shouting and me screaming obviously takes energy. With the game so concentrated, I've never had that many games that concentrated before. It's day after day after day. The first day we had 2 games as well. We had SSG and Bleed back to back. And at LANs, because you only have one night to prepare for your opponent, it's very long nights as a coach. Stay up preparing for the games, and Manchester crippled me. The SSG game, because I was shouting back at Ashen, it was a great shouting match, but because I had to rise to him, I couldn't let him have the status quo over us. I had to match him, and I just crashed that evening. Like the SSG game into the Bleed game, that evening I then did prep, or wanted to do prep for M80, because that was our game the next day, and I just couldn't. I just had nothing in the tank. I had to go to the guys, like, I have to sleep. I can't prepare for the game tomorrow. And that's one of the reasons that led to the map bans being completely fucked. We had no game plan, and is a catalyst to the 7-0. So I learnt from Manchester. I learnt that I have to reserve my energy levels. I have to know how to manage myself. And I did that at EWC better. It wasn't great. And then had no LAN until SI, and at SI I was perfect. I understood myself, I understood my limits, and that meant I could give the best to the team as well, because I was able to learn from Manchester. So it was tough, and because it was my first LAN, as 4 other players as well, we were all learning about what it meant to be at a LAN. So I felt that our EWC performance was a lot better because we all understood and learnt from that first LAN. The first LAN is tough. I understand why people say that now.
It's a learning curve that you can only fully grasp when you're there. And regional LAN to a international LAN is an even bigger jump. And then again, once you make stage, it's another massive leap. Like there's so many steps, there's so many layers to esports that you can't, you go from playing in your bedroom to playing at a national tournament, and then all of a sudden, if you do make it in front of a crowd, a stage, there's so many more additional pressures that add on to you. You mentioned there that you do have chronic fatigue. Now, you don't have to talk about it, or you don't have to talk about it in depth, but How have you gone challenging that? Because I guess this is something that we can kind of bring a little bit of awareness to as well. Esports is very different to sport in the way that sport you can train maybe 3 hours a day if you're an elite athlete. But esports, you could be doing prep all afternoon. You can play until 3, 4 a.m. Most people clock, 8, 10, 12 hours in a day. How on earth do you manage to juggle that away from lands? How do you manage to juggle that on a day-to-day, even just being in the tier 1 scene?
It's tough. Everyone knows about the gamer schedule. But if I had to wake up at 8, 9 a.m. or 7 a.m. for a normal 9 to 5 job, it would be really tough for me. So the schedule of esports just really fits into me being able to function properly, like function as a human. If I don't get enough sleep, I quite literally I can't think. Like I just can't. I can't have conversations with people. I can't.
Sure.
I can't do my job basically. So starting the days at midday, 1 p.m., which are usual like scrim times. It just fits for me perfectly, fits into actually being able to work and live a normal life. Well, I say normal. We're working for 10 hours a day, which does take its toll. I have to manage it. I have to regulate it. I understand how to do it and how to have my downtime. And I do make my teams aware that sleep is important to me. Some days I will turn up and I will have bad days. I can't help that, unfortunately, but as long as they know it, they respect that can happen, and I will give my all on every day as much as my body allows me. Then there's not a lot of barrier that I've found so far working from home because I can easily regulate the schedule at home. But when it comes to lands where it's very full on, that's where it has taken its toll on me. But the longer I've been in tier 1, the longer I've understood it more and more, and the condition more, and how to live and work with it.
Well, all I can say is kudos, because my first interaction with you, the very first time I met you, was at the Sixth Invitation, Boston. We can just call it group stages, but that's the very first time that I've interacted with you. Obviously, could see you on the cams throughout different events, but Boston was the first time that I got to see you in person, and you absolutely would never know that you had any kind of illness that would take away from energy or that would render you, I guess, tired at any event, at any stage. So that in itself is a phenomenal job to be at this level of the game and still be absolutely up there with the best, the most entertaining, we'll say, the most entertaining figures that we've got in Siege. And now we can transition to the DarkZero conversation, because this is one that is incredibly interesting. You had a year and a half with Into the Breach. You can please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you were there from roughly mid 2023.
Yeah, August 23 to December 24.
There you go. So over a year and 3 months, 4 months, and you managed to achieve, honestly, a lot of incredible feats with that roster and showcased what you can do as a coach. DarkZero come knocking. How does that come about? What's the conversation? How did you end up as DarkZero's coach?
I remember it very vividly. I was on my sofa watching I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, which takes place in Australia, UK reality TV show.
Shout out.
I was watching that with my mum, and I got a DM off BC, the general manager for DarkZero, saying, hey, looking at potential coaching staff replacements. Would you be interested in having a chat in 15 minutes or so, whenever? And I said, yeah, give me 15 minutes, which was the end of the episode of I'm a Celeb. So I had to finish the episode first. Then went and had a chat with him and Nath, and they just asked me, your usual stuff about coaches. But we had about an hour and a half chat which was really good. Like what they were looking for, what my qualities are, how could I maybe solve some of the issues that they were having or what they were looking for. Then that ended. They then came to me the next day asking for me to break down their Montreal Major game against SSG, just to see how I saw the game strategically. So just break down the rounds. It was a map they lost to get knocked out eventually. They lost Chalet 7-5. So break down the rounds, what caused them to lose those rounds, how did they struggle adapting, how would I look to adapt, and then submitted that to them. Then the next day they asked me for examples of tactical timeouts that I've had. So I had a little compilation that I built together of tactical timeouts that I've had, mainly from EWC in Stage 2 and Manchester. I didn't have any Stage 1, but I let them know that tactical timeouts was something that I recognize as a weakness of mine, like throughout the year. Probably like after Manchester, I realized like I really need to up my tactical timeout game. I don't feel like I was getting much influence from them. And I chronologically sorted the timeouts to show like my development from Manchester to EWC to stage and throughout Stage 2 and to the end of the LCQs in Stage 2 of Europe, to show like my development of those timeouts and how I have improved on them, because I really think like they're now a strong suit of mine. And the day after, they offered me the job.
Wow, that
is a very, very quick turnaround. I think it was 3-4 days.
Yeah, wow. I mean, that's a pretty interesting leap to go from a roster that you'd been with for a year and 3-4 months to quickly swapping to DarkZero for 6 Invitational Boston, which would have been a month and a little bit away from you signing on.
I think it was 2 months, 2 days.
Oh, that's a turnaround. That's a very quick turnaround. I'm going to ask you a plain yes or no question. Was an easy decision?
Yeah. I think so. To compete at the 6 Invitational, it's everyone's dream. And to compete with such a prestigious team like DarkZero, I mean, BC from EG.
Yeah,
I'm a fan. Obviously, Troy's been on the team. I have big respect for Nath as a player. I think he's highly underrated. And then the rest speak for themselves. Like Nick, NJR, Rob, both won majors. Bolo's won an invite, and Bolo's Beaulo. And
Beaulo is Beaulo.
And meeting and seeing Kobe, like, it was such a fantastic character. It was, it was an easy decision. It wasn't easy in the fact that I was leaving ITB behind, because that was kind of like my child. And we had achieved everything together. So to kind of feel like I was leaving them was hard, but in a way it worked out, because ITB then dissolved and fell into nothingness. So if I hadn't taken the job, I would be in a much worse position than I am now.
Well, we always take the steps when they're needed, and this one presented itself at the perfect time for you. I don't want to skip straight to SI. I want to know just very quickly, we don't have to spend too much time on it, but just briefly, what were those 2 months like? Look, it's a decent amount of time to have prep for a 6 Invitational, for an event like that. But at the same time, it's not a long time to be with a roster that is expected to still do great things. So what were those 2 months like in between?
So I broke it down into 2 separate months. The first month would be purely focused on internals, and the second month would be purely focused on externals. So before we got started, I watched through all their major games with their comms from the Montreal Major. They went 1-3 in Swiss. So I watched through all those games, and I tried to myself identify what their weaknesses were and what I wanted to immediately improve on internally. So we improved on a multitude of facets in terms of like communication, team play. Like one of my biggest pushes for as a coach is the numbers game, the trade game, and like the cohesion of a roster and how you use each other to win a round. So push for that in the first month to improve the team play side of things, because post-Canadian, it's a very different style. Like Canadian, everyone knows, is one of the best IGLs in the game, but he is the voice for the team. You know, everyone's listening to him. So moving on from him, you're very much changing styles and you're changing game philosophy. So I wanted to use that to implement, you know, my philosophy and help them kind of into the new age and the new meta in a faster style, more unpredictable style with Siege. I think that was very evident that we had become a lot of a faster team at SI compared to, you know, what DZ had previously been. And then, the second month was all about externals and how to win. Basically, how do we adapt to different teams? Similar premise. DZ before, very rigid, would do the same thing, VP style, would play their Siege. But in the current meta, I very much think, and you know, taken that from what I spoke about, Furia and FaZe countering us, we have to be able to play different styles to suit different teams. Like the way you play against Virtus Pro is not going to be the same way you play against G2 or BDS. So the second month was focused on how do we beat the opponent in front of us? How do we change how we play and adapt how we play to counter our opponent? So it was a very simplistic look at things. This month, first month, us. Second month, them. Hopefully that prepares us good enough for the tournament. Yeah,
it's the logical approach, right? You again, 1 + 2. Focus on yourself, then start to look at the opponents, which obviously, as we've already talked about, is a very big part of the Tier 1 Siege, especially when it comes to international events. Teams are well and truly, I mean, like, yes, international events, doesn't really matter whether it's a major or not. EWC, you're always going to put everything into it. But then when it gets to 6 Invitational, that's where all the pressure is. That's where you see teams crumble or become legends. And we've seen many of that over the year. Where do you feel like your performance, DarkZero's performance, landed at 6 Invitational? A lot of mixed reviews. I think you went 2-2 in groups and then unfortunately dropped out to Falcons, if I'm not mistaken. But there were some highs. There were also some moments where I'm sure you'd look back and wish you could have tweaked something, that something would have changed in the game. So how do you look at the performance in Boston?
I think for the first stepping block of the team under myself was a good metric for where we were at and what we needed to still improve on. I think that general takeaway and the general consensus of how we did was probably true. We had highs and we could show that we could beat teams like BDS in a best of 3.
Yep.
But then we had the lows of losing to PSG and ultimately being knocked out by Falcons, who we had previously beaten in the group as well. And that's just a result of us figuring out our inconsistencies as a roster at the event. Then I've said this quite a lot to people who have asked me about how SI went. And I always have said, you only find out what your true weaknesses are from official games. And the 2 months that we had prior to the tournament, we had no official games. And problems that hadn't reared their head in scrims, or we don't see in scrims, because people don't counter you in scrims. They don't counter you with playstyle. They don't figure out and exploit your weaknesses in a scrim because they're practicing for themselves. You only see that and when the pressure's on at officials. We figured out that the inconsistencies that we had in being able to form certain processes really faltered, and that's why you see us have the highs and the lows. Like we had days where our processes were on point and we were like understanding what we needed to do to win the rounds, but then there were days where we weren't able to figure out that answer, and it led to us having poor attacking performances. The first day against Raza Company, We won. We had a 1-5 attacking split on Nighthaven to go into overtime. We then won 2 attacks in overtime, which is, funny enough, how Siege always works. Then the next map, we won no attacks on Chalet. And the last map, like Consulate, we had better attacks, but we weren't able to send that to overtime. We ended up losing. So it is a very volatile time to figure out those things. We tried Band-Aid solutions at the tournament when we recognized things, but Band-Aid solutions are obviously only watertight to a certain extent. And we ended up kind of being found out and then exploited, which ended up ultimately costing us our place in the tournament.
Yeah, Boston was interesting to watch unfold because I think always for DarkZero there are expectations and probably bigger than most teams. And going into that tournament, there were high hopes. There were also some doubters. And I think that honestly, at the end of it, it was just it felt like it equaled itself out. Like, yes, you ended up losing to Falcons, who you beat in the group stages, but also, if I can be honest with the Falcons conversation, they have done phenomenal internationally over the last, really over the last year, primarily over the last year. So the fact that they have, that was a credit to them. But now we look to the future for DarkZero, and the future looks quite different to what it did in Boston. Beaulo obviously retiring and Kobelax has left the roster. So what is in store for 2025 for this gigantic team, this juggernaut?
I think for the 2 changes we've made, I think they both fill what we needed or we identified as our issues from SI. I think we've genuinely, hand on my heart, got the best possible pickup we could have had in Spirits. This for replacing Beaulo and what his role was in the team, and for us wanting to explore not having Nath on shields. Genuinely, we could not have had a better fit of a player for what we needed to replace Beaulo. And then Citizen, I'm a fan of co-IGLs, that you have like an IGL on the front line and an IGL on the back line. We had that in ITB with Azza and Kendru. Azza was on the front line, Kenny was on the back line. Us at SI, Nath was the primary caller, and although Pamba can call, it's not necessarily what I want him to be doing from his role, and from his lurk role is very difficult. Like the only other real lurk IGL at the highest level in the game is EFAC. No one else can really IGL from a lurk role. It's very difficult to do. And Rob can shot call. Pamba can shot call, but I don't want a shot caller. I want that hard, rigid person who can see how to win the round and then kind of puppeteer that. And that's what, building on from that conversation of Nath, that he wasn't able to really do that from shields, and he was our only player who could play shields. So we struggled to have that direction in a lot of rounds. But now we have like the formula that I believe is the best format to build a roster around. Citizen is our forward-facing IGL. Nath is our back-facing IGL. Nath can enable more with drone work rather than him having to be the first guy in the building. He doesn't see anything on the map because he's not droning if he's a shield. He's the first guy in the map a lot of the time. So now he can see more, he can spot more. Citizen can do the same. We've got the dual ability to do that. Pamba and Spirits are really good shot callers as well. So we've got a great balance for the thinkers to be able to make the solve the problems and give us the direction in the round. And that's what we lack to SI. And I feel like we've got a really good formula, and it's down to us. We're the only barrier for it to not work this year.
Yep. And speaking of this year, my friend, Reload, Rio, It is coming up in May. We are, but at the time of recording, we're 6 weeks away from that competition. 2 back-to-back international competitions for you to play with, no domestic league in between, or at least no tier 1 domestic league. This is a very tough ask to turn that around with, once again, no officials in between drinks.
Yep.
And it is a very interesting tournament. It's only partner teams invited. How are you and the team approaching this?
I think you take it the same as any tournament. You go to the tournament to win.
Yeah.
The tournament doesn't really have the same gravity as, say, a 6 Invitational. That's the only downside moving into the tournament. The prestige isn't there, you know? It's a new tournament, so there's no history to it. There's a struggle for storylines going into the event. So the gravity and the prestige of the event doesn't feel the same. However, as a team who want to see their progress and see, you know, these 2 months post SI, where we're at as a team, and to kind of, in a similar vein, you know, litmus test that new formula and what weaknesses we have, where we're going wrong from Reload to then build onto the rest of the year. I think Reload is a really good event to start the year off as a new roster, because it's not like you're just going straight into stage 1 where every game matters and could cost you SI points, could ultimately cost you SI through the global rankings at the end of the year if you start off slow. And you may not even make the major, etc. If you're just going straight into stage 1 as a new roster. I feel like Reload's a really nicely placed event to be able for us to understand where we're at as a team, and for us to be the strongest we possibly can going into stage 1.
Well, that will kick off in mid-May. If you watching at the moment, if the audience would like to grab tickets, they are still available. I believe the live arena is from the 16th to the 18th in Rio, so make sure you grab your tickets. There will be massive names there, regardless of the prestige in comparison to SI. It's an international event, as Kenny's gone ahead and said. It is going to be well and truly competitive from start to finish, no matter what. My friend, you know what? That's a perfect place to conclude. We look to the future. The future is bright for DarkZero. As for yourself, I like to do this with every interview that I have, which is I'll give you final comments. You can take this time to say whatever it is you'd like, whether you want to promo something, whether you want to tell certain haters certain words. I've had some very interesting characters say some things that I would probably have maybe wound back time and regretfully ripped it away from them, but I'll give you the floor now. Do you have anything you'd like to say?
I look forward to the rest of this year with DarkZero. Fantastic org, treat us amazingly, and I'm very privileged to be in the position that I am. I just can't wait for the rest of this year, and I'll be excited to see people at Rio, such as yourself, and yeah, I'm not very good with stuff off the top of the head, and I'm not calling anyone out. I'm not that type of person.
No. Look, I'll leave it there. I won't say any more. Ryan, thank you very much for joining me, mate. I wish you nothing but the best of luck for Rio and 2025 ahead. Hopefully, I'll see you in Rio. I have absolutely no idea who's going or what's happening there, but I hope to see you there. And look, at the very least, it's going to be an interesting year. Thanks for joining me, mate.
Thank you very much for having me on. It was a pleasure.